Create Art Podcast, Project National Novel Writing Month, and National Podcast Post Month. Hello, friends. This is Timothy Kimo Bryan, your head instigator for Create Art Podcast, where I take my 20 plus years of experience in the arts and education world and help you tame your inner critic and create more than you consume. Well, it's November. Can you believe it? For me, that means celebrating my favorite holiday, which is Thanksgiving. Also, this is my third year for National Novel Writing Month, and where I'll be writing a 50,000 word novel and podcasting every day for National Podcasting Post Month. Killing two birds with one stone. So you're going to hear from me every day in the month, reading the daily output of the novel. I'd appreciate any comments that you have, so please feel free to let me know what you're thinking. You can email me, timothy@createartpodcast.com, or if you go right to the website on each day, you can post your comments right there on the post. Now, why do I do this? Well, if I'm going to ask you to be brave out there and share your work, then I better do it myself. Plus, it keeps my creative muscle going. And who knows what's going to come out of my keyboard here. The podcasting side of the house, it helps me develop my podcasting skills in editing, posting, show notes, all that other stuff that hopefully you don't hear too much of. Now, you can find out about National Novel Writing Month by going to my website and in the show notes, and I'll have the links there for you. And also, National Podcasting Post Month also is going to be in the show notes. So here's today's output. Okay, so we are here at 4 November 2022. Words today, we got in 1,711, and that brings the total to 7,022 words. Wolfgang had driven to his uncle's house and met him in the driveway. Bruce marshaled him to the spare garage that was already opened, and Wolfgang drove his car inside, careful not to hit any of the equipment laying around. Both men got into a large nondescript SUV with Bruce in the driver's seat and left the house on their way to meet up with Cody and the followers of Zeno Clubhouse. On the outskirts of Alewell, Wolfgang started to open his mouth when Bruce interrupted. "Save it for Cody. Right now there's a target on your back and on my back, and the guy who can take us out doesn't miss. When we get there, you answer his questions and talk when spoken to only. You have put the organization in a very tenuous position, and a lot of people are working on things right now because of what you did. You pushed our hand when it didn't need to be pushed, and I'm not sure we will survive the fallout of things if things go sideways. Keep in mind, they will abandon us and hang us out to dry if they feel that the organization will be negatively impacted. What that means is that they will set you up as a lone wolf, and this state does have the death penalty. They will also go underground further and abandon me, so I won't be able to protect or help you out when it goes to trial. So whatever was in your mind last night that you told Cody, it better be worth all the energy we are expending," said Bruce, as he navigated through traffic and got them quickly to the clubhouse. Wolfgang just faced forward, mentally noting the direction they were heading. Bruce didn't turn on the GPS to direct them to the clubhouse so as not to be tracked. They both sat there in silence during the trip, no radio to break up the monotony, and it took about 35 minutes before the clubhouse appeared in view on one of the fields outside of town. When they got to the clubhouse, Wolfgang didn't see any other car parked or mailbox. The structure looked like an abandoned one-story farmhouse about a half-mile off the road with no driveway. Bruce carefully maneuvered his SUV through the field, separating the house from the gravel road that ran up next to the property. He knew there were certain areas that the group had laid detonators for landmines. There were other areas that only the followers knew that they needed to drive over to show that they were not followed. And they were supposed to be there. If anyone just got off the road and headed straight for the farmhouse, anyone inside would have been alerted and the trespasser would have been neutralized. Wolfgang was not party to this knowledge, so he looked quizzically at his uncle when he seemingly randomly veered this way and that way. The lights of the SUV that had been off during the drive out there flashed 5 times, and then Bruce put the SUV in park and shut the engine off. Both men exited the vehicle and approached the clubhouse's front door. Bruce looked up at the ceiling of the porch, and Wolfgang saw a red beam appear from a hole and rest on Bruce's eyes. It took about 3 seconds. The sound of unlocking a door occurred as if somebody was on the other side, and Bruce opened the door and walked inside with Wolfgang following close behind. They walked to the back of the clubhouse, which was unfurnished, and opened the door to what Wolfgang thought was the backyard, but instead it was to an office. There was a bank of monitors behind the desk at the back of the office, and behind the desk was a chair turned towards the screens. Bruce and Wolfgang could hear Cody's heavy breathing. "Take a seat, gentlemen," said Cody. The typical sound of keyboard clicking could be heard, and a few of the monitors went blank. He swiveled his leather-backed chair to face both men, and both men sat at 2 chairs facing, but not close to one another. Each chair was placed in front of one of the corners of the desk, which was about 3 feet wide. The top of the desk was pristine with no marks on it and no papers or folders, not even a keyboard or a laptop. "So I called this in-person meeting because you decided to go rogue and make a name for yourself, Wolfgang. Now, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you in person yet, and your uncle is one of our special members of the organization, so we give him a great deal of leeway when it comes to activities. But this, let me tell you, really forces our hand when our hand may not be ready for it," said Cody. "I wasn't privy to the discussion you two had last night. We haven't talked about it yet, so this whole incident, although surprising, naturally rests on my shoulders," said Bruce. "Responsibility is not the question, Bruce. That's already been determined, but I thank you for taking it on. No, the question remains, what do we do next, and how do we take this lemon and make it lemonade? Since we have an expert operator here that has no need of a mission or parameters for said mission, I was hoping he could enlighten me on the objective he was seeking," asked Cody. Wolfgang looked dumbfounded when Cody spoke and stared directly into his eyes. No one had intimidated Wolfgang like this in his life, and it took his uncle to clear his throat to break the silence for Wolfgang to speak. "So, as we discussed last evening, I thought the organization could use an actual physical work versus the cloak and dagger stuff we do now. I mean, it's been almost 2 years since we protested at the high school, and there doesn't seem to be any activity going on. So I took it upon myself to act in an effort to get our message out there. Since the elections are coming up in the next year and the degenerates want to ban our weapons and means of protecting our lives and families, I thought we could go ahead and use an incident similar to the high school shooting and make an impact that would help us get distracted with lobbying for our already given rights," said Wolfgang nervously. "Like we discussed last night, there are many moving parts that you're not privy to. What looks like no activity doesn't mean there isn't activity. Movement can be measured in millimeters, micrometers, and in smaller units, but it's still considered movement. What you've set in motion distracts our resources that we had planned for something else. If we're not careful, it could expose us when we're not ready to be seen just yet. Now, you mentioned the high school shooting, and you point to that, to what we did as something you think we should do more of. Interestingly, I was against that protest. I know the shooting didn't happen. I knew it was staged, and the damage we took to our reputation has taken about 2 years to recover from. The whole organization learned some good lessons from that mistake. Chiefly, we need to work more in the shadows until the time is ripe. The time was not ripe for that, and we had to carefully purge information from local media and the internet about our members. We had a few that had to go deep underground and are only now able to come back and participate in our projects. Your actions have made them reconsider coming back up because no one wants to go through that upheaval again, said Cody. I know that you have tapped my eyes and ears at the location, and they are under you right now. What is our next step that you would like to see happen? Asked Bruce. Well, I want to hear what Wolfgang thinks about what the next step should be. I still haven't heard what his objectives were and if he succeeded in them, replied Cody. Well, the first objective was to rouse us from from what I perceived to be slumber. I wasn't aware of other projects going on, replied Wolfgang. Let's stop you right there. Whom do you think should know about all the projects going on? Is it you? Your uncle? Me? Who would you recommend? Cody looked sarcastically. Naturally, you need to know what's going on. I'm just a cog in the machine for right now, timidly replied Wolfgang. Don't get me wrong. From the reports we are working on right now, we're in a good place in that you were not detected, either at the location or at work. We're putting together a social media blitz the likes you have never seen before, and we'll promote this as another hoax that is somehow connected to the opposition candidate. The wheels are already in motion, said Cody. I guess my next step would be to flood the media with content that discredits their sources, attack the integrity of the family members, and have a team harass them continually, replied Wolfgang. Go on, there must be some higher objective you have for the organization besides being the big dog on the block and trying to get some respect from others, said Cody. I don't want our group to be categorized as a bunch of middle-aged white guys sitting around in tinfoil hats concocting conspiracies and gaining in self-confidence. And who might that be, saying we're a bunch of tinfoil hat-wearing nut jobs? Asked Cody. My boss at work. I was going to target his kid, but when I got to the school and opened the door, there was a girl there, and I panicked and shot her and left after clearing the casings. My original plan was to target my boss's kid and then watch him as he eventually would get the news. That was my primary objective, confessed Wolfgang. Thank you for listening to this episode of Create Art Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard or absolutely hated it, hey, please feel free to leave me a comment right there on the website, or you can email me, timothy@createartpodcast.com. If you got something out of any of the episodes here, please consider sharing it with a friend. And if you would, also let me know what would make this a 5-star podcast, I'd like to hear that. I want to make sure that I'm helping you tame your inner critic and create more than you consume. By the way, I run another podcast called Find a Podcast About, and that's where I help you outsmart the algorithm and find your next binge-worthy podcast. You can find that at findapodcastabout.xyz. If you go to the website, there's a way where you can leave me an actual voicemail, which I think is pretty nifty. Anyhow, I have a lot of reviews there of different podcasts from different genres, and I even have some interviews from the podcasters themselves. So if you're looking for a new podcast with a great recommendation, with a well-thought-out critique of everything you need to know about the podcast, then go to findapodcastabout.xyz. We'll see you next time.